My ex-wife set me up with a deaf woman as a joke, and she made sure the whole room knew it was coming. Rachel booked the corner table at the nicest restaurant in town, invited half our old friends to happen to be there, and told them all to watch. She wanted a show. She wanted to see me freeze, fumble, and humiliate myself in front of everyone who used to call us the perfect couple. For 2 years she'd told people I was cold, distant, a man who couldn't connect with anyone. And tonight she planned to prove it. What Rachel didn't know was that I'd spent 6 years of my life as a sign language interpreter before I ever met her. She didn't know there was an entire part of me she'd never bothered to learn. So when that woman walked through the door and every head turned to watch me panic, I lifted my hands and started to sign, and the smile fell right off my ex-wife's face. But nobody in that room, not Rachel, not our friends, not even the woman herself, was ready for what came next. My name is David, 34 years old, divorced 11 months ago after 7 years of marriage that ended with a single sentence Rachel said to her sister on the phone, a sentence she didn't know I heard. She said I was the kind of man who would never let anyone truly in, that I was emotionally unreachable, that marrying me was like loving a closed door. I didn't fight her on it, maybe because part of me wondered if she was right. I showed up to that restaurant in a simple gray jacket, no expectations, no armor. Just a man trying to get through a Friday night. The hostess smiled and walked me to a table near the window. That's when I saw them. Rachel, our old friends, sitting 2 tables away, pretending to study their menus but watching me the way people watch a car that's about to crash. My stomach tightened, but I sat down anyway. Then the door opened. She walked in slowly, confidently, a woman who clearly didn't need anyone to part the room for her. Dark coat, quiet eyes that moved across the space like she was reading it. Her name, I would later learn, was Claire, 31, a ceramic artist who had been deaf since she was 4 years old. She had driven 40 minutes because a mutual contact told her she was meeting someone worth her time. She had no idea she was the punchline. When her eyes found mine, I stood up, and without thinking, without performing, without trying to impress a single soul in that room, I raised both hands and signed, slowly and clearly, "It's really good to meet you. I hope the drive wasn't too bad." Claire stopped walking. Her eyes dropped to my hands, then back to my face. Something shifted in her expression. Not shock exactly, but the quiet recalibration of someone who had walked in expecting one thing and found something completely different standing in its place. Behind me, I heard Rachel's fork hit her plate. But Claire just smiled. Small, real, the kind of smile that doesn't perform for anyone. She signed back. "The drive was fine. You're the last thing I expected tonight." And just like that, the joke was already over. The only people who hadn't figured that out yet were the ones who set it up. We sat across from each other in that restaurant, 2 people who had both been handed a script we never agreed to follow. And somewhere between the first cup of coffee and the second, we both quietly threw the script away. Claire ordered chamomile tea. I ordered black coffee. The waiter looked only at me when he spoke, the way people always did when they were with her, like she wasn't sitting right there, like she was invisible. Claire noticed. She always noticed. But she didn't flinch. She simply turned her cup slowly in her hands and waited for him to finish, then looked directly at him and pointed clearly to what she wanted on the menu. No frustration, no performance, just quiet, unshakable dignity. I watched that and felt something move inside my chest. We started talking, really talking. Not the kind of surface conversation people have when they're trying to impress someone. The kind where you forget there's a room around you. She told me about her ceramic studio, how she could feel the vibration of music through the floor when her neighbor played guitar downstairs, how she had learned to read the energy of a room before she ever read anyone's lips. She said most people thought being deaf meant living in silence. She said silence was actually the place where she heard everything clearest. I leaned forward and signed, "What do you mean?" She smiled and signed back. Hearing people are so busy filling space with noise that they never actually listen. I don't have that problem. I sat back in my chair and laughed. A real laugh, the kind I hadn't felt in 11 months. 2 tables away, Rachel was watching. I could feel it without even turning around. The energy of someone who expected to see a fire and instead found 2 people having the best conversation in the room. Every few minutes I caught the sound of hushed voices behind me, the scrape of a chair, the clink of glasses held by hands that didn't know what to do with themselves anymore. But I didn't turn around. Not once. Because what was happening at my table was too important to interrupt. Claire asked me how I learned to sign. I told her about the 6 years I spent as an interpreter, the community center, the families who were learning, the children who lit up the first time someone spoke their language back to them. I told her it was the most alive I had ever felt in my professional life. Then she asked why I stopped. I was quiet for a moment. I got married, I signed. And somewhere in that marriage, I started putting away the parts of myself that my wife didn't understand. Claire studied my hands after I finished signing, then looked up at my face with an expression so steady and clear it felt like being seen through glass. That, she signed slowly, is one of the saddest things I've ever heard. And the thing was, she wasn't pitying me, she was just telling the truth, the kind of truth that only lands when someone has absolutely no reason to soften it for you. I looked down at my hands, the same hands Rachel once told me were always too still, too closed, too quiet. The same hands that had just spent the last hour and a half speaking an entire language she never knew I carried. That was when it hit me, not like a wave, more like a slow light, coming on in a room that had been dark for too long. Rachel hadn't set me up to humiliate me tonight. She had accidentally reminded me of exactly who I was before she ever met me. I exhaled slowly. Outside the window, Seattle moved in its quiet Friday night rhythm. Inside that restaurant, 2 tables away, I heard Rachel's chair push back. I heard her voice drop low saying something to the group. I heard the sound of people realizing the show they came to watch was not the show they were getting. But Claire tapped the table gently to bring my eyes back to hers. "Are you still here?" she signed. I looked at her and nodded. "Good," she signed back. "Because I'm not finished talking to you yet." And right there, in that moment, I made a decision. Not about Claire, not about Rachel, about myself. I decided I was done putting away the parts of me that made me whole, just because someone else couldn't understand them. That decision would cost me something before the night was over. But I didn't know that yet. And before we get to what happened next, because what happened next changed everything, I need to ask you something real quick. My ex-wife told everyone who would listen that I would never amount to anything, that I couldn't build something people actually cared about. Right now, you can prove her wrong with one tap. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Every subscriber is proof that connection, real, quiet, deep connection, is always worth something. Don't let her be right. Now let's get back to David and Claire, because the night was far from over. The night should have ended there. 2 cups emptied, a conversation that had quietly rewritten something inside me, and a woman across the table who had no idea she had done it. We should have said goodbye at the door, exchanged numbers maybe, and walked out into the Seattle night carrying whatever this was gently in our hands like something new and fragile. But Rachel had one more move left. As Claire and I stood from the table, reaching for our coats, I heard heels on hardwood. Deliberate, familiar, the sound of someone who had decided the night wasn't going the way she planned, and was going to do something about it. Rachel stopped 2 feet from our table. She looked at Claire first, then at me. Then she smiled the way people smile when they're about to say something they've been rehearsing in their head for the last 2 hours. "David," she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I hope you told her this was all just a little joke. I set this up because I thought it would be funny to watch you struggle. I didn't actually think you two would." She gestured vaguely between us. "Whatever this is." The restaurant went quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet, the held breath kind. The kind where every person in the room suddenly becomes very interested in their plate because they don't want to be caught watching but cannot look away. I felt my jaw tighten. But before I could sign a single word to Claire, before I could even turn to look at her, Claire stepped forward. She looked directly at Rachel, calm, unhurried, the way a woman looks at something that once seemed large and has just revealed itself to be very small. Then Claire raised her hands and signed, slowly, deliberately, making sure every movement was crystal clear, and I interpreted aloud so the entire room could hear every single word. "Thank you for tonight. You brought me here to laugh at someone. But what you actually did was introduce me to the most present, most attentive, most genuinely interesting man I have met in years. You handed me something rare trying to hand him something humiliating. That tells me everything I need to know about why he's no longer yours." The room stayed completely silent. Rachel's smile didn't fade slowly. It just stopped, like a light switched off. Her face went through 3 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds and didn't settle comfortably on any of them. One of the mutual friends at her table let out a breath that was almost a laugh and then quickly covered it with a cough. I looked at Rachel for a long moment. No anger, no satisfaction, just the quiet recognition of a chapter that was genuinely, completely finished. "Good night, Rachel," I said, and I held the door open for Claire. Outside, the Seattle air was cold and clean, the kind of cold that wakes you up and reminds you that you are alive and standing and breathing and still here. We walked side by side down the pavement, neither of us rushing, the city moving quietly around us. After half a block, Claire touched my arm to stop me. I turned to face her. She signed, "Did that bother you? What just happened in there?" I thought about it honestly before I answered. Then I signed back. 6 months ago, it would have destroyed me. Tonight, it just felt like closing a door that should have been closed a long time ago. She nodded slowly, taking that in. Then she signed, "Can I ask you something personal?" I nodded. "That part of you, the interpreter, the community work, the sign language, all of it. Why did you really let it go?" I looked up at the sky for a second. The clouds were low and gray, the way Seattle clouds always are, pressing gently down on everything, like a hand on a shoulder. "Because I spent 7 years with someone who made me feel like the quieter parts of me were inconvenient," I signed. So I packed them away to make more room for what she needed. And somewhere along the way I forgot they were still there. Claire watched my hands finish the sentence. Then she looked up at my face with those steady, reading eyes of hers. "They were always there," she signed. "I could tell the moment you sat down." Something about that sentence, so simple, so completely without drama, broke something open in my chest in the best possible way. Not painfully. The way a window breaks open on the first warm day of spring and lets the air come rushing back in. We exchanged numbers at the corner where our paths split. She had a studio session early the next morning, and I had an apartment that suddenly felt less like a place I was hiding and more like a place I was returning to. Before she turned to leave, she signed one last thing. "Same time next Friday?" I smiled wider than I had smiled in longer than I could remember. "Same time next Friday," I signed back. I watched her walk away until she turned the corner. Then I stood there on that pavement for a moment, alone in the cold, quiet air of a Friday night that had started as a joke and ended as something I would carry for the rest of my life. Rachel had wanted the room to watch me fall apart. Instead, the room watched me remember who I was. And the woman she chose to use as a punchline, the woman who drove 40 minutes expecting nothing and found something real, she was the one who helped me find my way back to myself. 3 weeks later, Claire and I went back to that same restaurant, not because we had to, because we wanted to. We sat at the same table by the window. The same waiter served us. But this time he looked at both of us when he spoke. Small change. Real change. The kind that happens quietly when people decide to pay attention. Claire ordered chamomile tea. I ordered black coffee. And we picked up the conversation exactly where we left it. No noise between us. No performance. No one in the room waiting to watch us fail. Just 2 people who had been handed a bad beginning and built something honest out of it anyway. Because that is what people do when they are real, when they are paying attention, when they choose, against every reason not to stay at the table and keep talking. And if this story moved something inside you, if you felt even a fraction of what David and Claire felt in that restaurant, then you already understand that real connection is the rarest and most powerful thing in the world. Rachel said I would never build anything people cared about. Right now you can prove her wrong with one single tap. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Every subscriber tells her, and everyone who ever underestimated a quiet person, that depth always outlasts noise, that presence always outlasts performance, that the people who get written off are often the ones with the most extraordinary stories left to tell. Don't let her be right. Subscribe, turn on that bell, and come back next time, because the next story is already waiting for you.